The phone rang in the middle of surgery, cutting through the steady rhythm of monitors and the hum of the operating room. My hands were deep inside a patient's cranial cavity when my assistant leaned close and whispered, "Dr. Carter, there's an urgent call from Crestwood Academy. They said it's about your grandson." I didn't look up. "You must have the wrong Dr. Carter. I don't have a grandson." But something in her voice made me pause. A tremor that had nothing to do with hospital protocol. "They were very specific," she said. "They asked for Dr. Elaine Carter, chief of neurosurgery." The name of the school struck me like a cold scalpel. Crestwood Academy. 17 years ago, my son Michael had attended that same school. The same halls, the same brick walls where he once dreamed about the future that never came. "Take over," I told the resident, stepping away from the table. My hands were steady, but my pulse raced as I stripped off my gloves. Within 30 minutes, I was in my car, driving through the gray drizzle toward Crestwood. Every heartbeat echoing a question I couldn't silence. The campus looked unchanged. Red brick, manicured lawns, the flag flapping in the damp wind. A woman in her 50s met me at the door. Principal Nora Jennings. Her silver hair framed a calm, professional smile that failed to reach her eyes. "Dr. Carter, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, motioning toward her office. "There's been some confusion." "Confusion," I repeated. "I don't have a grandson." She hesitated, then opened a side door. "Ethan, would you come in, please?" A boy stepped inside. He couldn't have been more than 13. His dark hair was unruly, his posture uncertain, but when his eyes met mine, my breath caught. Blue-gray eyes. Michael's eyes. My eyes. He looked at me for a long moment, studying me with unnerving calm. Then he said softly, "You look just like your picture." My throat went dry. "Who are you?" "Ethan Brooks," he said. "My mom's name is Rachel. Rachel Brooks." That name tore open something I had buried for almost 2 decades. Rachel Brooks, Michael's high school girlfriend. The girl who vanished after his death. Ethan's voice wavered. "They said I was being expelled. Mom didn't show up. She's been missing for 3 days. Her boyfriend said she just left, but she wouldn't leave without telling me." I felt the sterile precision of my life dissolve. "Where's your mother now?" He looked down. "I don't know, but I need your help, Dr. Carter. Please." For 17 years, I'd buried grief under layers of professionalism and control. Now, standing in that office, looking into my son's eyes, reborn in this boy's face, I knew everything was about to change. I sat across from the boy, every instinct inside me torn between disbelief and recognition. Ethan Brooks, 13 years old, the son of Rachel Brooks, the same Rachel who had loved my son Michael when they were barely adults. Principal Jennings excused herself, leaving us alone in the quiet office. The tick of the clock on the wall sounded painfully loud. I studied him, not as a doctor, but as a woman trying to make sense of a miracle that shouldn't exist. He fidgeted with the strap of his backpack. "Mom said, if anything ever happened, I should find you." My voice came out softer than I intended. "Why me?" "She told me you were the only person who ever really loved my dad." The words hit harder than any scalpel slip ever could. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but the first that escaped was the one that mattered most. "Where has your mother been?" Ethan shrugged, trying to appear older than his years. "We live on the east side. She works at the hospital admin. I think her boyfriend moved in a few months ago. Things got worse after that." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "They fought a lot." "About what?" "Money and me." His voice cracked on the last word. He said, "Mom should have sent me to live somewhere else. She said I was her whole life." The simplicity of his statement tore at me. This child had lived through things no 13-year-old should ever have to understand. "When was the last time you saw her?" I asked gently. 3 nights ago," he said. "She was supposed to pick me up from school, but she never came. Her boyfriend told me she ran off with someone from work." He looked at me then with eyes too sharp for his age. "She wouldn't leave me." "I know she wouldn't." My hands trembled slightly. "And you told the police?" "They said they'd talk to her boyfriend, but nothing's happened. The logic-driven surgeon inside me wanted to analyze, to piece together evidence, to treat this like any other problem that required precision and calm. But the grandmother I was only beginning to realize I might be, felt an ache I couldn't rationalize. "Ethan," I said finally, steadying my tone. "I need to see proof. Something that shows your father was Michael Carter." He nodded quickly, opening his backpack. From it, he pulled a small worn velvet pouch. Inside was a silver pocket watch, old and scratched, but unmistakable. I'd given it to Michael on his 16th birthday. When he placed it in my hand, my breath caught. I turned it over, reading the inscription I already knew by heart. "Time reveals truth." He looked at me, waiting. "Do you believe me now?" I closed my fingers around the watch, feeling its familiar weight anchor me to the impossible. "Yes," I whispered. "I believe you." The drive back to the hospital was a blur of gray streets and blurred memories. Ethan sat in silence beside me, his backpack clutched tightly to his chest, the watch tucked safely inside. Every few minutes, he glanced out the window as though expecting to see his mother appear from the crowd. At a red light, I finally asked, "How long have you been alone?" He shrugged. "Since Monday night, I've been staying with my mom's boyfriend's son. It's not great." I bit back the questions that rose to my lips about food safety school. My mind was already cataloging the steps. Call the police. Contact social services. Search hospital records. Logic was all I had left. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, my phone buzzed. The number flashing on the screen was from the emergency department. "Dr. Carter," came the voice of the trauma nurse. "Urgent but controlled. We have an unidentified female victim. Severe head trauma. The ID in her purse says Rachel Brooks." My blood ran cold. "Is she alive?" "Barely. She's being prepped for neurosurgery." For a moment, the sterile parking lot tilted around me. "I'm on my way," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan noticed the change in my expression. "What is it? Did you find her?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The clinical side of me, the surgeon who'd spent decades separating life from death by a few millimeters of tissue, knew what those words meant. Severe head trauma. Prepped for neurosurgery. When we reached the emergency wing, the nurses recognized me immediately, clearing the way. I was no longer Dr. Carter, chief of neurosurgery. I was simply a woman running toward the operating theater, afraid of what she might find. Through the observation glass, I saw Rachel pale, motionless, surrounded by machines and bright lights. A young resident was intubating her. The monitors screamed with uneven rhythm. "She's my patient," I said automatically. One of my colleagues stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "Eleanor, you can't operate. You know the rule about family." I swallowed hard, then put Dr. Levine on it, and I want full access to her case behind me. Ethan's voice trembled. "Is that her?" "Yes," I said, forcing the word out. He took one step closer to the glass, pressing his palm against it. "She's going to be okay, right?" I wanted to promise him she would. Instead, I did what doctors do when hope and honesty collide. I met his gaze and said, "She's in the best hands possible." But inside, I was praying something I hadn't done in years, because if Rachel Brooks didn't make it, this boy, my grandson, would lose the only parent he'd ever known. Rachel's surgery lasted nearly 5 hours. I spent every minute of it pacing the hallway outside the operating room, a dozen scenarios circling in my mind. I'd performed hundreds of procedures like this one, but watching someone else do it on her was unbearable. When Dr. Levine finally emerged, his expression gave me the first flicker of hope.
"She made it through," he said.
"There's swelling, but we controlled the bleeding. We'll keep her sedated for now." Ethan exhaled shakily beside me, his hands clenched in fists for hours, finally relaxed. "Can I see her?" Briefly, Levine said, "Just for a minute." Inside the EQ, Rachel lay pale and still, her face bruised and swollen, a breathing tube in place. Machines clicked and hummed softly around her. Ethan moved to her bedside, reaching for her hand. "Mom," he whispered. "I found her. The doctor you told me about. She's here." I stood at the foot of the bed, every wall I'd ever built beginning to crumble. This woman, barely 30, had carried a piece of my son's life all these years. When we stepped out, Ethan said quietly, "We need to go to our apartment. There's a box my mom keeps with my dad's things. Maybe it'll help you believe everything." The next afternoon, Detective Harris from the local precinct escorted us to the apartment. The door was marked with police tape, the lock broken, the living room in disarray. Ethan walked through slowly, eyes darting from the overturned chair to the shattered lamp. "He did this," he said under his breath. Derek, he was angry. In the hallway closet, he found what he was looking for, a metal box, dented and dusty. He lifted it like something sacred. "This is it." The detective checked inside, nodded, and handed it back. "You can take it." Back at my condo, Ethan placed the box on my dining table and opened it carefully. Inside were photos, folded letters, and small keepsakes, a movie ticket stub, a pressed flower, a worn-out guitar pick. Then, at the very bottom, an envelope with my name written on it. For Dr. Eleanor Carter. The handwriting read neat, deliberate, heartbreakingly familiar. I unfolded the letter. The paper had yellowed, but the words were clear. "Dear Dr. Carter, you don't know me, but I loved your son. My name is Rachel Brooks. I'm 4 months pregnant. I tried to call you, but your office said you weren't taking personal calls. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I thought you should know." I stopped reading. The room spun. All those years I had believed Rachel had vanished out of guilt or shame, but she had tried. She had reached out. And my silence, the silence I'd built to protect myself from pain, had kept me from my own family. Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts. "She said she tried to tell you." Tears burned my eyes. "She did, and I never answered." In that moment, the past 17 years reshaped themselves around a single truth. She hadn't hidden him from me. I had hidden from her. 2 days later, Rachel began to stir. Her chart showed improvement, reduced swelling, stable vitals, increasing brain activity. I stood by her bedside, the monitors beeping in steady rhythm. As Ethan sat holding her hand, whispering updates she couldn't yet hear. "She's stronger than she looks," I said softly. "She's the strongest person I know," he replied without hesitation. His voice cracked, and he quickly looked away. When her eyelids fluttered for the first time itself seemed to slow. Ethan leaned forward. "Mom, can you hear me?" "It's me, Ethan." Her lips moved, no sound at first, then a whisper, faint but certain.
"Ethan."
He gasped, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Yeah, Mom. I'm here. You're safe." I stepped closer, unable to speak as emotion clawed up my throat. Rachel's eyes opened wider, struggling to focus. When they landed on me, confusion flashed across her face. Then recognition. "Dr. Carter." Her voice was barely above a breath. "Yes," I said, taking her free hand gently. "I'm here." Her brows knitted together, trying to piece together fragments of memory. "You're real," she murmured. "I tried to tell you about Ethan years ago." I nodded, my vision blurring. "I know. I found your letter." A tear slid down her temple. "I never wanted to keep him from you. I know that now." The moment was fragile, suspended between regret and forgiveness. For 17 years, I had carried anger without a target, grief without closure. Now, looking at the woman who had loved my son and raised his child alone, that anger dissolved into something deeper. Understanding. Ethan stayed pressed against her side, unwilling to let go. He told her about finding me, about the call, about the search. Rachel listened, eyes filled with a mother's pride and pain. When exhaustion overcame her, I guided Ethan out of the room. In the hallway, he wiped his face on his sleeve. "She's going to be okay, right?"
"She's healing," I said.
"It'll take time, but she's going to make it." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you're here for both of us." His words settled deep inside me. For years, I had believed my purpose ended when Michael's life did. But standing there watching Ethan, a living echo of my son, I realized how wrong I had been. Rachel's recovery would be long, uncertain, and full of challenges. Yet, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since the night of that awful phone call about Michael.
Hope.
And this time, I wouldn't let silence steal it from me again. Rachel's recovery took months. She spent the first 6 weeks in rehabilitation, relearning balance, speech, and strength. I visited every day, bringing Ethan after school. The three of us would sit by the wide windows overlooking the Charles River, talking about everything and nothing. For a woman who had fought alone for so long, Rachel carried an unshakable will to live. By the time she came home, my once sterile condo had already begun to change. It was no longer a place designed for quiet efficiency. It was beginning to sound like life. Ethan had taken over the guest room, walls now plastered with astronomy posters and guitar picks taped near his desk. The faint hum of his music filled the evenings, blending with the smell of real meals cooking in the kitchen. Rachel's discharge day arrived with cautious optimism. She stood in my living room, cane in one hand, eyes scanning the space. "This place doesn't feel like yours anymore," she said with a small smile. I laughed softly. "No, I suppose it doesn't. It feels like ours." She hesitated, her pride flickering. "Eleanor, you don't have to do all this. We'll get our own place when I'm back at work." "You will," I said, meeting her eyes. "But not until you're ready. You've carried enough weight alone. Let someone else help for once." That night, Ethan fell asleep on the couch, his head resting on a pillow, the old pocket watch clutched in his hand. I watched him sleep, remembering Michael at the same age. The restless energy, the bright eyes. "Time reveals truth," the inscription had said. I finally understood. Truth wasn't always about answers. Sometimes it was about rediscovery. In the weeks that followed, life found a rhythm. Rachel started therapy part-time at a clinic that specialized in trauma recovery. Ethan returned to school determined to catch up. I adjusted my hospital schedule, trading late surgeries for afternoons spent helping with homework or grocery shopping. My colleagues were stunned. I had been the surgeon who never left the OR. Now, I was simply a grandmother learning how to live again. There were awkward moments, of course. There were times when Rachel's independence clashed with my instinct to control, when Ethan tested boundaries I didn't yet understand. But each argument, each uneasy silence became part of the process of becoming a family. One evening after dinner, Ethan strummed his guitar softly, the melody drifting through the apartment. Rachel leaned against the doorway, smiling faintly. "He gets that from Michael," she said. I nodded. "Yes, and the determination. That's all you." She laughed quietly, and for the first time, the sound didn't carry exhaustion. It carried peace. The house that once echoed with emptiness was full again. Not perfect, not polished, but real. 5 years passed in what felt like a heartbeat. The condo that had once been a silent refuge now overflowed with laughter, arguments, and music. Rachel had rebuilt her life with quiet resilience, working as a rehabilitation therapist. I had retired from surgery, turning my focus to teaching. And Ethan, our Ethan, was preparing to graduate at the top of his class. That morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen as I flipped pancakes. "Has anyone seen my keys?" he called from upstairs, his voice deeper now, confident yet still carrying the same warmth. "They're on the counter," Rachel answered, arranging a bouquet on the table. She moved more easily these days, her limp barely noticeable, her energy steady. When Ethan finally appeared, dressed in his blue gown and cap, I felt my throat tighten. He was the image of his father, Michael's eyes, Michael's smile. But there was something more, a steadiness that came from surviving storms none of us had expected. "Ready?" I asked. "Born ready," he grinned, though I could see his hands tremble just slightly. At the ceremony, as he walked across the stage, Principal Jennings, her hair now completely white, shook his hand proudly. "From the boy who once stood in my office terrified and angry," she said, "to the young man standing here today, Ethan Brooks, valedictorian." Rachel squeezed my hand. "He did it," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "We did." Later that evening, friends and colleagues gathered in our living room. Ethan brought out his guitar, glancing between us with a shy smile. I wrote something for today, he said. It's called The Call That Changed Everything. The first notes filled the room, tender and searching, rising and falling like memory itself. His voice steady and pure flowed through lyrics about loss and rediscovery, about a phone call that shattered one life and rebuilt 3 others. When the final chord faded, Rachel reached for my hand, tears glistening in her eyes. Michael would have been so proud, she whispered. I know, I said. And I think somehow he already is. Ethan looked at us, smiling through his own tears. You two taught me that families don't have to be perfect, he said. They just have to find their way back to each other. Outside, the evening lights of Boston shimmered on the river. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by love reclaimed from years of silence, I understood legacy isn't measured in titles or achievements. It's the courage to answer when life calls again. Summer settled over the city, soft and golden. The kind of warmth that makes everything feel possible again. Our lives had slowed into something steady, something ordinary, and that was the greatest miracle of all. Ethan had started college on a full scholarship, dividing his time between biology labs and late-night music sessions. Some days he talked about becoming a neurosurgeon like his grandmother. Other days he dreamed of composing film scores. I told him the truth that both choices required precision, patience, and heart, and he had all 3. Rachel continued her work at the rehabilitation center, guiding patients who, like her, had clawed their way back from the edge. Watching her encourage others was like witnessing hope made visible. Every time I saw her smile, I remembered the frail woman in that hospital bed years ago and marveled at how far she'd come. As for me, I finally learned what it meant to live outside the operating room. Mornings filled with coffee and quiet. Evenings spent listening to Ethan's music echo through the apartment. And sometimes when I passed the old pocket watch on the mantel, I would trace my thumb over the words engraved inside. Time reveals truth.
The truth was simple now.
I hadn't been saved by medicine or logic or control. I had been saved by love, messy, unexpected, persistent love that refused to let grief have the last word. One night, as Rachel and I sat on the balcony overlooking the river, she said softly, "Do you ever wonder how different things might have been if we'd found each other sooner?" I smiled. Maybe, but I think we found each other exactly when we were meant to. The city lights shimmered below, the river whispering against the shore, and for the first time in my life, everything felt complete.